By 1943, weapons inspections across Allied and Axis forces were uncovering the same problem on every front. Soldiers were carrying firearms they had never been issued. Military regulations left no room for interpretation. Personnel were assigned specific weapons, matched to specific ammunition, and logged by specific serial numbers. Anything outside that chain was unauthorized. Discovery meant confiscation. Repeat offenses meant formal charges. In some units, possession of a non-regulation weapon was treated as evidence of looting, indiscipline, or worse. The regulations were clear. The front lines were not. Men facing death carried what kept them alive. Sergeants looked the other way. Officers weighed discipline against effectiveness and made choices that never appeared in any report. These are 10 banned weapons soldiers used anyway. Number 10. Mauser C96, the unwanted relic. The Mauser C96 was already old when the Second World War began. Designed in the 1890s, the semi-automatic pistol had earned its reputation across colonial wars, revolutions, and the trenches of 1914 to 1918. Its distinctive box magazine, long barrel, and wooden holster stock made it one of the most recognizable handguns ever produced. By 1939, hundreds of thousands remained in circulation across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. But it was no longer a standard-issue weapon in any major army. German forces had moved on to the Luger and the Walther P38. Soviet forces had their Tokarevs and Nagant revolvers. The C96 belonged to a previous generation. Modern logistics had no place for it. Its ammunition complicated supply. The original 7.63mm Mauser cartridge was not standard in any major arsenal by the 1940s, and variants rechambered for 9mm parabellum created confusion over which rounds a given pistol actually required. Armorers could not guarantee parts. Quartermasters could not guarantee ammunition. Officers could not guarantee that the weapon would function when it mattered. Regulations reflected this. Non-standard sidearms were to be surrendered, replaced, or left behind. Soldiers found carrying C96 pistols faced confiscation and reprimand. But the C96 kept appearing. Rear echelon troops, partisans, and soldiers in secondary theaters carried them because they were available when nothing else was. In China, where the C96 had been copied and distributed for decades, it armed irregulars and resistance fighters who had no access to modern supply chains. In Eastern Europe, veterans of the previous war carried pistols they had owned for 20 years, trusting familiarity over regulation. The consequences were predictable. Ammunition ran dry. Parts could not be sourced. Soldiers who relied on an obsolete pistol discovered its limits at the worst possible moment. The Mauser C96 was not banned because it was dangerous. It was banned because it could not be supported, and in a war built on logistics, a weapon without supply was a weapon waiting to fail. Number 9. Walther P38, the confiscated replacement. The Walther P38 was one of the finest combat pistols of the war. Adopted by the Wehrmacht in 1938, it was modern, reliable, and designed for the realities of field use. Its double-action trigger allowed soldiers to carry it with a round chambered safely. Its mechanism tolerated mud, sand, and cold in ways the Luger never could. German forces issued it widely, and by the middle of the war, it had become the backbone of their sidearm inventory. For Allied soldiers who captured one, the temptation was immediate. British officers carrying Webley revolvers knew the P38 was a superior weapon. American infantry issued the Colt 1911 recognized its advantages in capacity and handling. Soviet troops often found it more reliable than their own Tokarevs in extreme cold. But regulations across Allied forces were explicit. Captured enemy weapons were not to be retained. They were to be surrendered to intelligence units for evaluation. A soldier carrying a German pistol created identification risks, particularly at night, at distance, or in the confusion of a fluid engagement. Ammunition could not be resupplied through standard channels, and if the weapon malfunctioned, no armorer was obligated to repair it. Officers conducted inspections specifically to identify and confiscate captured P38s. Soldiers caught with them faced disciplinary action, confiscation, and in some units, formal charges. Despite this, captured P38s were hidden in packs, tucked into holsters alongside issued sidearms, and quietly retained by men who believed their survival depended on the best weapon available, not the one stamped on their equipment list. The P38 was not confiscated because it was unreliable. It was confiscated because it was too good to ignore and too dangerous to allow outside the chain of supply. Number 8. Luger P08. The officers' sidearm soldiers kept. No sidearm of the Second World War was more coveted than the Luger. Its toggle lock action was unlike anything else in service, and its silhouette was instantly recognizable. Its association with the German officer corps gave it a prestige that no other pistol could match. To Allied soldiers, capturing a Luger was not simply acquiring a weapon, it was acquiring proof. Regulations prohibited it absolutely. Captured enemy weapons were contraband. Military police searched for them. Officers confiscated them. Intelligence units demanded they be surrendered for evaluation. The risks were clearly stated. A soldier carrying a German pistol could draw fire from his own side. 9mm parabellum ammunition was not standard Allied issue, and if a man was captured carrying an enemy officer's sidearm, the consequences were unpredictable. None of this mattered. Lugers disappeared by the thousands, taken from surrendered officers, pulled from bodies, traded between units, and stolen from collection depots. Soldiers mailed them home in pieces. They hid them in footlockers and packs. Some carried them openly, daring superiors to object. The Luger was rarely used in combat by the men who took it. Most treated it as a trophy rather than a fighting weapon, but its possession was still a violation, and in documented cases, soldiers were formally disciplined for refusing to surrender one. The Luger was forbidden for every rational reason command could articulate. Soldiers kept it for reasons command could not address, because what it represented was worth more than any regulation written by men who had never taken one. Number 7. Captured K98K scoped rifles, borrowed precision. By 1943, soldiers on every front understood that a scoped rifle could decide an engagement before it began. The German Karabiner 98K, fitted with telescopic sights, was one of the most effective sniper weapons of the war. Its accuracy at range, combined with the flat-shooting 7.92mm Mauser cartridge, made it feared by Allied troops from North Africa to the Eastern Front. When these rifles were captured, they were supposed to be surrendered for intelligence processing. Enemy weapons with optics were of particular interest to ordnance evaluators and counter-sniper specialists. Regulations made no exception. But scoped rifles were rare. In many units, dedicated sniper weapons were in short supply or non-existent. A soldier who recovered a scoped K98K from a dead marksman held something his own army could not provide, a precision tool capable of reaching targets no standard rifle could touch. Reports from the Italian campaign and the hedgerow fighting in Normandy describe Allied soldiers using captured scoped K98K rifles in overwatch positions, in defensive lines, and during patrols where long-range observation was critical. The weapon's distinctive crack was sometimes mistaken for enemy fire by friendly units, a risk that officers warned about and soldiers accepted. Ammunition was a persistent problem. The 7.92mm Mauser round was not in Allied supply chains. Soldiers who carried these rifles stockpiled, captured cartridges, and rationed them carefully, knowing that when the ammunition was gone, the rifle became dead weight. Officers who discovered captured, scoped rifles in their units faced a choice: confiscate the weapon and lose a capability their own supply could not replace, or tolerate the violation and manage the risk. Some confiscated, some looked the other way, and in a handful of documented cases, officers quietly authorized their use for specific operations, a compromise that appeared in no official record and satisfied no formal regulation. The captured K98K occupied the uncomfortable space between what regulations demanded and what the battlefield required, a weapon too valuable to ignore and too foreign to support. Number 6. Captured M34. Machine guns, the machine gun you weren't supposed to carry. The MG-34 was one of the most versatile automatic weapons of the war. Firing at nearly 900 rounds per minute, it served German forces as both a light and medium machine gun, mounted on bipods for squad support or tripods for sustained defensive fire. Its engineering was precise, its firepower devastating, and its presence on the battlefield unmistakable. When Allied forces captured intact MG-34s, regulations required immediate surrender to ordnance or intelligence. The reasoning was practical. The weapon fired 7.9 2mm ammunition unavailable through Allied logistics. Its operating mechanism was unfamiliar to troops trained on Bren's, Browning's, and Vickers guns. And its distinctive sound signature, faster than any Allied machine gun, created an immediate misidentification risk. A captured MG-34 firing from an Allied position sounded, to every soldier within earshot, exactly like an enemy gun. Documented cases describe friendly units engaging positions held by their own forces after hearing the unmistakable rate of fire of a German machine gun coming from an unexpected direction. Despite these risks, captured MG-34s were used. In fluid combat, where units were under strength and outgunned, the firepower of a captured machine gun could hold a position that nothing in the squad's inventory could defend. Soldiers who turned captured MG-34s on their former owners accepted the danger of friendly fire, ammunition exhaustion, and the inability to repair a weapon designed by an enemy armorer. Command's objection was not theoretical. Men died because captured weapons sounded like the enemy. Reports from Italy and the Western Front describe engagements where the sound of a German machine gun in an Allied position triggered responses that cost lives on both sides of the line. The MG-34 was banned from Allied hands for the most practical reason of all: it could get you killed by your own side. If you're still watching, you already understand. These weren't accidents, they were decisions, and the closer we get to number 1, the more dangerous those decisions became. Number 5. Modified or captured MP40, submachine guns, the enemy's gun. The MP40 was the submachine gun of German mechanized infantry. Its folding stock, straight magazine, and smooth rate of fire made it one of the most recognizable weapons of the conflict. To Allied soldiers who encountered it in close combat, its calm, mechanical chatter was unmistakable. Hearing it from your own lines was cause for alarm. Regulations prohibited the retention of captured submachine guns for every reason that applied to pistols and machine guns, and for additional concerns. A soldier firing an MP40 in an urban environment created immediate confusion. In the smoke and noise of close quarters fighting, identification depended on sound as much as sight. The MP40's rhythm was German. Any ear trained by months of combat knew it instantly. Yet captured MP40s were carried. Some soldiers acquired them during fluid advances when their own weapons were lost or damaged. Others deliberately sought them out, believing the MP40's controllable fire rate and compact design made it superior for the close-range fighting that dominated urban and woodland combat. In documented cases, soldiers modified captured MP40s, filing sights, altering stocks, wrapping grips, treating them as personal weapons rather than battlefield recoveries. The consequences were real. After-action reports describe incidents where Allied soldiers carrying MP-40s drew fire from their own positions. Officers who discovered modified enemy submachine guns treated them as serious violations, evidence not merely of possession, but of sustained, premeditated use. The MP-40 was banned because it sounded like the enemy. Soldiers used it anyway because it fought like one. Number 4. FG-42 Automatic Rifles, the rifle that wasn't yours. The FG-42 was never meant for ordinary soldiers. Developed exclusively for Germany's Fallschirmjäger, elite paratroopers, it was one of the most advanced infantry weapons of the war. Select fire, lightweight, fitted with a side-mounted magazine, a built-in bipod, and optics capability, it combined the precision of a rifle with the firepower of a light machine gun. At a time when most armies still issued bolt actions, even within the German military, the FG-42 was restricted. Its machining was complex. Its parts required precision manufacturing that wartime Germany could barely sustain. Production numbers were small, and allocation was limited to units whose mission profiles justified the expense. Most German soldiers never saw one. When Allied forces captured an FG-42, they were under strict orders to surrender it for technical evaluation. Intelligence units considered the weapon a priority acquisition. Its gas system, recoil mechanism, and layout represented innovations that Allied weapons designers wanted to study in detail, but soldiers who understood what they held were reluctant to give it up. A handful of documented cases describe Allied troops retaining captured FG-42s in combat, using them until ammunition was exhausted. The weapon's rarity made it difficult for officers to identify on sight, and its full-power cartridge gave it a lethality that standard-issue rifles could not match. Possession carried severe consequences. The FG-42 was classified intelligence material. A soldier caught retaining one faced not just confiscation and discipline, but investigation into how and why a restricted enemy weapon had been kept outside official channels. The FG-42 was not simply unauthorized. It was a weapon so advanced that command wanted it in a laboratory, not in the hands of a rifleman who refused to let go. Number 3. Trench-modified M. 1897 shotguns, the illegal cut. The Winchester Model 1897 had been controversial since the First World War. Germany had formally protested its use in the trenches of 1918, calling the pump-action shotgun inhumane and demanding its withdrawal under the laws of war. The protest was rejected, but the stigma lingered. By the Second World War, the shotgun occupied an uncomfortable position in American doctrine, authorized for specific roles but never fully embraced as a primary combat weapon. Regulations governed how the M1897 could be configured. Barrel lengths were specified. Modifications were prohibited. The weapon was to be carried as issued, maintained as issued, and employed within the parameters that command had approved. Soldiers in the Pacific had other ideas. In the close-range fighting of jungle warfare, men cut barrels shorter than regulations permitted, reducing overall length for faster handling in dense vegetation and confined spaces. The modifications were crude, performed with hacksaws and files, and the muzzle was recrowned by hand if it was finished at all. The result was a weapon that could be brought to bear faster, but at the cost of pattern consistency, range, and mechanical integrity. A poorly cut barrel could rupture. An improperly crowned muzzle sent pellets in unpredictable directions. And a shotgun shorter than regulation specifications was, by military definition, a modified weapon, subject to confiscation and the discipline that accompanied the destruction of government property. Officers who discovered shortened shotguns faced the same dilemma that ran through every entry on this list. The modification was dangerous and forbidden. The man who made it believed it would save his life. And in the suffocating proximity of jungle combat, that belief was not easily dismissed. The trench-modified M1897 was not just an unauthorized weapon. It was evidence that a soldier had deliberately altered government property to suit his own judgment, a calculation that command understood but could never officially condone. Number 2. Modified steel hand granite M24 grenades, the ticking risk. The German steel hand granite M24, the iconic stick grenade, was designed with a specific fuse delay, a specific blast radius, and a specific fragmentation profile. Every element was calibrated, every parameter was set at the factory. Soldiers changed them anyway. Captured stick grenades were modified by Allied troops in ways no manual authorized and no officer approved. Fuse delays were shortened by cutting or crimping the fuse cord. Fragmentation sleeves were added using wire, nails, or scrap metal to increase lethality. In documented cases, multiple grenade heads were bundled together to create improvised satchel charges, devastating in effect and unpredictable in execution. The risks were extraordinary. A shortened fuse left almost no margin between ignition and detonation. Soldiers who miscalculated the cut died holding the grenade. Improvised fragmentation added shrapnel that could not be predicted or controlled, killing the thrower or his own squad as easily as the enemy. Bundled charges sometimes detonated partially, scattering live ordnance across a position. Military authorities in every army prohibited the modification of explosive ordnance. The reasoning required no explanation. A grenade was a controlled detonation device. Any modification to its timing, casing, or payload introduced variables that could not be managed by the man holding it. Yet the modifications continued. Soldiers who believed a faster fuse or a heavier blast would clear a bunker, break an ambush, or by the seconds needed to survive, accepted risks that explosives training explicitly warned against. Officers who discovered modified grenades confiscated them immediately, not as a formality, but as an urgent safety measure. A modified grenade in a soldier's pack was a threat to everyone around him. But in the chaos of advancing fronts, tracking every grenade in every soldier's possession was impossible. The modified steel hand granite was not simply forbidden. It was a weapon whose alteration placed the man who carried it in as much danger as the enemy it was meant to kill. Number 1. Homemade suppressor-modified rifles, the line that command wouldn't tolerate. No modification was more forbidden than this. Suppressors were not standard infantry equipment during the Second World War. The technology existed, and specialized weapons like the Delisle carbine and the Welrod pistol proved that suppressed fire was achievable. But these were tools of covert operations, built under classified programs and issued exclusively to intelligence operatives and commando units under strict control. For ordinary infantry, suppressors were prohibited absolutely. Regulations made it clear any attempt to reduce the sound or flash signature of a standard-issue weapon was unauthorized. The reasoning was partly practical. Improvised suppressors failed catastrophically more often than they worked, and partly doctrinal. Command did not want soldiers believing they could operate silently when they could not. A false sense of concealment could lead men into positions they would never survive. But soldiers tried anyway. Using whatever materials were available, oil filters, steel tubing, wire mesh, rubber baffles cut from vehicle components, men constructed crude suppressors in the field. Some reduced the report of a shot from a sharp crack to a muffled thump. Others did nothing at all. And some failed violently, rupturing under pressure, increasing back pressure that damaged the weapon's action, or causing barrel obstructions that turned the next round into a catastrophic malfunction. Flash reduction was attempted more frequently. Soldiers wrapped muzzles in cloth, attached improvised flash hiders fashioned from tin cans or salvaged metal, or packed material around barrels in attempts to hide their position during night fighting. The results were unpredictable. Some methods reduced visible flash, Others caused misfires or dangerous gas venting that burned hands and faces. The consequences of discovery were severe. Possession of an improvised suppressor, even a non-functional one, was treated as a serious offense in most armies. It was not viewed as a survival adaptation like a shortened stock or a modified grip. It was interpreted as an attempt to operate outside the boundaries of conventional warfare, to circumvent identification, evade accountability, and function in a manner reserved exclusively for classified operations. Soldiers caught with suppressor-modified rifles faced confiscation, formal charges, and in documented cases, investigation by military intelligence for suspected unauthorized covert activity. The modification was considered fundamentally different from every other entry on this list, not a bending of rules, but a crossing of a line that command drew in ink and defended without compromise. And still, in night fighting, in sniping positions, in situations where revealing a muzzle flash meant death, soldiers reached for silence even when silence was forbidden. They understood the risks. They accepted the consequences. And they pulled the trigger anyway, knowing that silence, even imperfect silence, was the one advantage no regulation could replace when the alternative was a muzzle flash that marked you for death. These 10 weapons tell a story that official histories rarely acknowledge. The Second World War was not fought by soldiers who obeyed every regulation, carried only what their quartermaster issued, and never questioned the doctrine printed in their field manuals. It was fought by men who calculated the distance between compliance and survival, and chose survival when the gap became too wide. Every weapon on this list was forbidden for reasons that were sound, practical, and often life-saving. Standardization prevented chaos. Inspections prevented accidents. Regulations prevented the kind of improvisation that killed as often as it saved. And every weapon on this list was carried anyway, by soldiers who weighed those reasons against the reality of what they faced, and decided that doctrine was not enough. The gap between regulation and necessity was never closed during the Second World War. It was simply crossed, one weapon at a time, by men who understood that following orders and staying alive were not always the same thing. If you want the history behind the regulations, the weapons, the choices, and the consequences that official records were never designed to capture, subscribe. The next story is already on the way.